The call came from an unknown number. Dominic Corsetti, the most feared Mafia boss on the East Coast, almost ignored it until he heard her voice. "Sir, please do not hang up," the young woman said, breathless, terrified. "I am a waitress. I think your daughter is unconscious. She is lying in an alley." His heart stopped. The man who had ordered deaths without flinching felt his blood turn to ice. "Where?" he demanded, his voice deadly quiet. "I do not know the address," she cried. "I just finished my shift." She collapsed near the bus stop on Maple Street. "She keeps calling your name." The line went silent for half a second. Then the devil himself was already moving. 3 black SUVs tore through the city like a storm of metal and fury. Cars swerved out of the way. Traffic lights meant nothing. Men who had never known fear tasted it for the first time. When he arrived, he saw the sight that shattered him. His daughter, his Lily, lay on the cold, filthy ground of a dark alley, pale as porcelain, lips turning blue, motionless, and beside her knelt a woman, thin, exhausted, shivering in the October cold because she had wrapped her only jacket around his child. Her hands trembled as she stroked Lily's hair, trying desperately to keep the little girl awake. "I did not know who else to call," the waitress whispered, her voice breaking. "She would not let go of your name." Dominic Corsetti, Il Diavolo, the man who ruled the city's underworld with an iron fist, dropped to his knees on the dirty pavement, because in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not his empire, not his enemies, not the blood on his hands, only whether his little girl would open her silver eyes again. "Stay with me until the end. Because what this broken waitress with $8 in her bank account does next will change the fate of that dying child and the monster who would burn the world for her." If this story moves you, hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. Now, let us get into it. But to understand the miracle that unfolded that night, we must turn the clock back 24 hours earlier, back to the woman named Elena Hartwell, the woman whose fate was about to intertwine with the most feared Mafia boss on the East Coast. Elena was 27 years old, yet her eyes were far older than her years. The eyes of someone who had seen too much suffering, who had cried herself empty, who had learned how to survive when the entire world turned its back on her. She had been orphaned at the age of 12, when her parents died in a car accident on the highway, and with no relatives and no family left, she was thrown into the state system like an unwanted object no one wished to claim. 7 foster families in 6 years. 7 houses where none of them ever felt like home, 3 of which left scars on her body and on her soul. Scars she never spoke of to anyone. At 18, Elena aged out of the system with a bag of old clothes and a promise to herself that she would survive at any cost. And 9 years later, she was still fighting to keep that promise. Elena worked 3 jobs at the same time. During the day, she washed dishes at a cheap Italian restaurant downtown, where the manager routinely groped female employees and called it harmless joking. In the early evening, she waited tables at a 24-hour diner called Rosie's Diner, where drunken customers regularly threw food at her and walked out without leaving a single cent in tips. Late at night, she cleaned an office building, mopping floors and scrubbing toilets until her hands cracked open and bled. She slept an average of 3 to 4 hours a night, sometimes even less. 2 years earlier, Elena had been stabbed during a robbery at the diner, the knife leaving a 15-centimeter wound across her abdomen and sending her to the hospital in critical condition. The doctors saved her life, but the medical bills killed her in a different way. $73,000, a number she could never repay even if she worked herself to death. Debt collectors called every day, threatening lawsuits, threatening to seize property she did not own. Then there was Jason, the first and only man Elena had ever trusted. The man who said he loved her, said he would take care of her, then tricked her into signing a $15,000 loan before disappearing with all the money. Now Elena carried that debt as well, with crushing interest, and every month the number only grew. 3 weeks ago, while showering, Elena discovered a lump in her breast. She had no health insurance, she had no money to see a doctor. All she had was a quiet fear that gnawed at her every night. The fear that her body was betraying her, that she would die alone in her miserable apartment with no one ever knowing. Elena's apartment was on the south side, where gunshots echoed like background music every night, with no working heat, cracked windows letting in the wind, and cockroaches crawling everywhere. She was 2 months behind on rent, and the landlord had threatened to throw her out onto the street within a week. Her bank account held $8.63. She had not eaten a full meal in 5 days, surviving on stale bread thrown away by the restaurant and cold tap water. The soles of her only pair of shoes were torn through, and she lined them with cardboard so her feet would not touch the freezing ground. That was Elena Hartwell, a woman with nothing but pain, a woman whose life had pushed her to the very bottom of the abyss, a woman who, on that night, walking home from work in the cold October wind, would hear a sound that would change her fate forever. That night, the clock read 11:43 when Elena stepped out the back door of Rosie's diner. Her 17-hour shift had finally ended, yet her body was far too exhausted to feel any sense of relief. Her feet were swollen inside her torn shoes, every step a small act of torture. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but she had grown used to that feeling. Hunger was an old companion, a loyal one that never left her side. Her tips for the night came to just $11. A drunken customer had thrown a cup of coffee at her, called her useless, then walked out without paying. Manager Rick not only failed to defend her but deducted the cost of that man's meal from her wages. And just before she left, Rick called her into the back room to inform her that her hours were being cut starting next week, 6 shifts reduced to 4. The reason given was low revenue, but Elena knew the truth. She had refused to let Rick touch her, and this was how he chose to retaliate. The October wind cut through her thin jacket like a blade. She had bought it at a thrift store 3 years earlier for $5, and now it was so worn it was nearly useless. But it was the only thing she had to shield herself from the cold. The bus stop was a 5-minute walk away. The last bus would arrive in 15 minutes, if she was lucky. If she missed it, she would have to walk 2 hours home through streets where young women often vanished without a trace. Elena quickened her pace, ignoring the protests of her aching legs. She passed dark alleys, shuttered shops, street corners where darkness pooled thick as ink. She had learned not to look into the shadows, not to be curious about strange sounds, not to involve herself in other people's business. In this neighborhood, curiosity could get you killed. But tonight, the darkness did not give her that choice. As Elena passed the alley beside the bus stop, she heard a sound. Small, faint, like the breath of someone struggling to stay alive. She stopped, every instinct screaming at her to keep walking. Do not turn back, do not look. But the sound was too small, too desperate. It did not sound like an adult. It sounded like a child. Elena turned toward the alley. The darkness swallowed everything. But the weak glow of a streetlight reached just far enough for her to see a small shape curled on the ground. Her heart skipped a beat. She ran into the alley, forgetting every survival rule she had ever forced herself to follow. It was a little girl, about 6 or 7 years old. Golden blonde hair spread across the filthy pavement like discarded silk. She wore an expensive white dress, the kind Elena had only ever seen in magazines she could never afford, now stained and soiled, and the child lay motionless like a dropped doll. Elena knelt beside her, her knees hitting the icy concrete, but she felt no pain. She placed a hand on the child's chest and felt her heartbeat. Weak, irregular, dangerous. The girl's lips were blue, her skin pale as porcelain, cold sweat beading on her forehead. This was not a cold. This was not a fall. This was something far more serious, something Elena had no power to fix. The child opened her eyes, and Elena nearly fell backward. They were silver gray, like molten metal, like moonlight trapped inside her pupils. Elena had never seen eyes so strange, so hauntingly beautiful in her life. "Papa," the girl whispered, her voice as fragile as a final breath. "Papa, I am scared." Then the silver eyes closed. Panic surged through Elena as her trembling fingers checked the child's pulse. Still there, but weaker than before. She needed to call an ambulance. She needed help. She pulled out her phone, about to dial 911, when she saw it. On the child's wrist, a silver bracelet, a black rose with sharp thorns engraved into the metal, heavy and expensive, not the kind of jewelry children usually wore. Elena knew that symbol. Everyone in this city did. The black rose of the Corsetti family. The mark of the most infamous crime syndicate on the East Coast. The mark of people who, if you touched them, you disappeared without a trace. Elena's hand froze around her phone. She had just found the daughter of the devil. Elena stared at the black rose tattoo on the child's wrist, her mind racing through millions of thoughts at once. She knew the stories. Everyone in this city did. The Corsetti family was not something you toyed with. They were the darkness that swallowed anyone foolish enough to touch them. They were the reason bodies floated down the river without ever being investigated. They were the nightmare that even the police bowed their heads to. And Elena had just found the boss's daughter. Her survival instinct screamed inside her skull. Walk away. Stand up and leave right now. Call for help from the bus stop and disappear. Leave no name. Leave no trace. Do not get involved with these people. Those who helped the Corsetti family usually ended in one of two ways. Either they were pulled into that world and never escaped, or they knew too much and were silenced forever. But the child in her arms was breathing more weakly by the second. Her lips were turning bluer, her skin more ashen. Every passing moment was one step closer to death. Elena was not a hero. She was just a woman with $8 in her bank account. No health insurance, no family, no one who would cry if she vanished. But she had once been a child alone in the dark, begging for someone to come and save her. She knew that feeling. She would never forget it. Elena's hands trembled as she searched the small pouch sewn into the child's dress. She did not know what she was looking for. Maybe identification. Maybe a clue to where the girl lived. Maybe anything at all that could help her make the right decision. She found a phone. Not a child's toy phone, but an expensive smartphone, the kind Elena could never dream of owning. The screen was cracked, likely from the fall, but it still worked. The phone was locked with a passcode, but emergency calling was enabled. Elena opened the call history, her heart pounding wildly. There was only one number, called over and over again. A single contact listed for emergencies. The name appeared on the screen, and Elena felt the blood in her veins turn to ice. Papa, call only in an emergency. She stared at the number, 10 digits that could change her life forever. 10 digits that led straight to the most dangerous man on the East Coast. 10 digits that could save this child's life or end Elena's own. She could call emergency services. She could let them come and handle everything. But then what? The police would arrive. They would see the bracelet with the Corsetti crest. They would know who the child was. And in a world controlled by the Corsetti family, that knowledge might put the girl in more danger, not less. Or Elena could walk away, leave the child here and pretend she had seen nothing. But if she did that, this child's blood would be on her hands for the rest of her life. She would never wash it away. Never. The girl stirred, silver eyes fluttering open for a brief instant. Papa, she whispered again, weaker than before, more desperate than before. Papa, I want to go home. And Elena made her decision. She pressed the number before she could change her mind. She lifted the phone to her ear, the ringing echoing like the tolling of fate. 1 ring, 2 rings. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. 3 rings. Then someone answered, and the voice that came through the line made Elena understand that she had just called the devil himself. The line went dead the moment Elena gave the address. No goodbye, no promise, only the cold beep signaling the end of the call. Elena stared at the darkened phone screen, wondering what she had just done. She had called a Mafia boss. She had given him her exact location. She had willingly stepped into a vortex that no one ever escaped intact. But there was no time for regret. The child in her arms was growing colder by the second. Elena slipped off her thin jacket, the only thing shielding her from the October cold, and wrapped it around Lily's small body. The wind cut into her skin like thousands of needles, but she did not care. She lifted the child's head onto her lap and gently smoothed the golden hair now, matted with dirt. Your father is coming, Elena whispered, not knowing whether she was comforting the child or herself. Hold on, just hold on a little longer. Lily opened her eyes, the silver dulled by pain as they looked up at Elena. Who are you? She asked, her voice faint as a passing breeze. I am just someone passing by. Elena tried to smile, even as her lips had turned blue from the cold. But I will stay here until your father arrives. I promise. Are you an angel? Lily asked, her silver eyes brightening for a fleeting moment. Mama said that when I am scared, angels come. Elena did not know how to answer. She was not an angel. She was a broken woman with $8 in her account. No home, no family, no future. But looking into the child's hopeful eyes, she could not bring herself to deny it. Maybe tonight she could be someone's angel. Even if only for one night. Time dripped past like water. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Elena did not know how long had passed when she began to hear it. Engines. Not one vehicle. Many. A roar tearing through the quiet night, coming from far away and closing in at a terrifying speed. The ground beneath her began to tremble. Instinct told her to run, to slip back into the shadows and disappear before it was too late. But she could not leave the child. She would not leave the child. 3 black SUVs stormed into the alley like a steel and fury hurricane. Headlights blazed, burning away the darkness, turning night into day in an instant. Brakes screamed, tires scorched the pavement, and the vehicles stopped with military precision just meters from Elena. She closed her eyes, bracing for the worst. Doors opened in unison, and men stepped out. Elena opened her eyes and saw her nightmare made real. They wore expensive black suits, but there was nothing refined in the way they moved. They moved like predators, every step calculated, every gaze sweeping for threats. Their hands rested inside their jackets, where Elena knew weapons waited that could end her life in a fraction of a second. These were not bodyguards. These were killers, professional murderers who did not know the meaning of mercy. They fanned out, sealing the alley, locking down every possible escape. Elena felt like a mouse trapped in a cage with a pack of starving feral cats. Yet none of them looked at her. All of them turned toward the middle vehicle, whose door remained closed. They were waiting. The entire alley was waiting. Then the door opened, and darkness stepped out. Dominic Corsetti was taller than Elena had imagined, broader, more terrifying. He emerged from the vehicle as if rising from hell itself, each step thickening the air, dropping the temperature around him by several degrees. Black hair streaked with early silver at the temples gleamed beneath the streetlights. A faint scar ran from the corner of his left eye down across his cheekbone, a reminder of violence long past. But the most frightening thing was his eyes. Steel gray, cold as eternal winter, the eyes of a man who had seen death hundreds of times and never flinched. Those eyes swept over Elena, and she felt her soul laid bare, as if he could see through every secret she had ever hidden, every fear she had ever buried. Then those eyes dropped to the child on her lap, and everything changed. The moment those steel gray eyes saw Lily, Dominic Corsetti's face collapsed, not like a wall being destroyed, but like a glacier melting under a burning sun. The cold, ruthless, terrifying shell he had built over so many years shattering in a single second. He lunged forward, no longer the Mafia boss the entire city feared, but a father, an ordinary father being slowly torn apart by terror. Dominic dropped to his knees beside Elena, his knees striking the filthy concrete without the slightest care, and the hands that had signed death warrants for dozens of men trembled as they touched his daughter's face. "Lily," his voice broke, stripped of all coldness, all menace. "My daughter, Lily. Look at Papa. Open your eyes. Please, please open your eyes." Elena witnessed something she had never believed she would see in her lifetime. Tears. In those steel gray eyes that had forced an entire city to bow, tears welled up, not false, not weak, but the tears of a man about to lose the only thing that had ever truly mattered to him. Lily opened her eyes, the silver dulled by pain yet still recognizing the man before her. "Papa," she whispered, her lips trembling as she tried to smile. "I'm sorry. I hid in the laundry truck, and when it stopped near the bright lights, I climbed out. I just wanted to see the real world." "Do not talk." Dominic lifted his daughter from Elena's lap and crushed her to his chest as if she were the last treasure left on earth. "Do not apologize. Papa is here now. Papa will not let anything happen to you. Never. Do you hear me? Never." He turned toward his men, and in that instant, Elena saw the devil return, compassion vanishing into death, a broken voice hardening into a lethal command. "Call Vaughn!" Dominic roared at the tall man nearest him, whom Elena instinctively knew was his right hand. "Tell him to prepare the operating room, immediately, and find the security team that let the laundry truck leave without inspection." That is how she slipped out. "I want them gone. If my daughter does not make it, I will kill everyone he loves. Every single one. Slowly, and I will make him watch." The man nodded, pulled out his phone, and stepped aside, issuing icy orders into the line, while the others moved like a perfectly programmed machine, 2 rushing to the vehicles to start the engines, 2 more sweeping the alley, checking every shadow. No one asked what had happened. No one needed explanations. They acted with ruthless speed and precision, as if their lives depended on it, and perhaps they did. Dominic rose to his feet with Lily in his arms, her small body nearly swallowed by his massive frame, and walked toward the vehicle, each step measured, careful, as if afraid of hurting her further. But before getting in, he stopped and turned back to Elena, still kneeling on the frozen ground, shaking in the cold without her jacket. His steel eyes swept over her, assessing, dissecting, seeing through her completely, and Elena felt as though she were under a microscope. She wanted to run, to disappear, to erase the memory of this night, but her legs refused to move. "You," Dominic said, his voice echoing through the alley like thunder. Not a question, not a request, but an order. Elena tried to speak, but her throat was dry, and no sound came out. "Come with me," Dominic said, then turned and climbed into the vehicle without waiting for an answer, without caring whether she agreed or not, because in his world, orders did not require consent, only obedience. The tall man stepped up beside her, his face cold, his eyes empty. "Marcus Webb," he said, neither introduction nor threat. Get in the car. Elena looked at the gleaming black SUV, at the open door like the mouth of a beast waiting to devour her, knowing that stepping inside could be the last decision of her life, and knowing just as surely that she had no other choice. She rose on trembling legs and stepped into the darkness. Inside the SUV, Elena felt as if she had been swallowed into another world. The soft leather seats cradled her exhausted body, the scent of expensive hide and high-end cologne filling the enclosed space. This was a kind of luxury she had never touched in her life, the kind she had only ever seen in films about the elite, but she could not enjoy it. Not with two men seated on either side of her like stone statues, silent and menacing, their hands resting on their thighs, though Elena knew with certainty they could draw a gun in a fraction of a second. The convoy surged forward the moment the doors shut. No waiting, no hesitation. 3 black SUVs tearing through the city night at a speed Elena was sure exceeded every legal limit, though the law did not exist for people like these. Through the window, the city blurred past in streaks of light, traffic signals changing colors without slowing the vehicles, other cars veering aside instinctively as if their drivers could sense the power rushing toward them, police officers standing on street corners watching the convoy pass and then turning away as though they had seen nothing. And Elena understood then that this was Dominic Corsetti's city, that he did not follow the law, he was the law. 15 minutes later, the convoy left downtown and entered the outskirts, where mansions stretched behind tall walls and lush rows of trees. Yet when they stopped before a massive iron gate, Elena realized those mansions were nothing compared to this place. The Corsetti estate was not a home, it was a fortress. Iron gates towering more than 4 meters high with threatening spikes crowning their tops, sliding open slowly as the lead vehicle approached. Security cameras mounted everywhere, infrared lights sweeping over the convoy like the eyes of a beast inspecting its prey. Thick perimeter walls, Elena guessed, could withstand rifle fire, and once inside she saw even more layers of security, guards in black suits spaced along the stone driveway, each armed, each tracking the vehicles with sharp, unblinking eyes, trained dogs patrolling the shadows, their low barks echoing somewhere in the distance, floodlights arranged so there was no blind spot, no shadow deep enough for an intruder to hide. Then the mansion itself rose before her, and Elena stopped breathing. It was a castle. There was no other word for it. 3 imposing stories in classical European architecture. White marble columns supporting vaulted roofs, stained glass windows reflecting the lights like enormous jewels. A bronze fountain at the center of the courtyard with an angel statue standing atop it. Wings spread wide as water murmured softly in the still night. Gardens stretching on both sides with perfectly trimmed trees shaped into artful forms. Flowers blooming vividly despite the cold October air. Elena thought of her crumbling apartment where cockroaches crawled along the walls and rats scurried beneath the floor. Of how a month's rent there likely did not equal the cost of a single flower in this garden. Of how a lifetime of her labor could not buy even one paving stone beneath her feet. And this world felt so alien it bordered on unreal, as if she had stepped into another dimension where her poverty became cruelly meaningless. The car stopped at the main entrance. The man to her right opened the door and motioned for her to step out, and she did, her torn shoes touching polished marble steps, a sense of displacement deeper than anything she had ever known. Ahead, Dominic had already exited the lead vehicle, Lily still in his arms, as a medical team rushed out from the front doors, a stretcher ready, equipment gleaming under the lights, taking Lily from him and racing inside as every second became priceless. Dominic stood there for a moment, watching his daughter disappear beyond the doors, his face a mask of stone without emotion, while his hands clenched so tightly the knuckles turned white. Then he turned to Elena, steel gray eyes piercing her through the darkness. "Inside," he said, his voice low and cold, and Elena stepped into the lion's den. Inside the mansion, everything was even more magnificent than Elena had imagined. The ceilings soared overhead, painted with frescoes of angels and drifting clouds, while crystal chandeliers glittered like thousands of captive stars. The polished white marble floors reflected her image like a vast mirror, forcing her to confront the pitiful sight of herself, wrinkled clothes, tangled hair, torn shoes, leaving dirty marks on pristine stone, a stain of oil on a flawless canvas. A middle-aged woman in a housekeeper's uniform appeared from somewhere, her expression calm, as if bringing a stranger inside at midnight were the most ordinary thing in the world, and led Elena to a waiting room in the east wing, where deep red velvet sofas, a crackling fireplace, and expensive oil paintings lined the walls. A cup of hot tea and a wool blanket were placed beside her without her needing to ask. Elena sat down, her body sinking into the soft cushions, yet she could not relax. Her hands still trembled as she held the tea the heat spilling onto her fingers and burning them, though she felt no pain. Every one of her senses was fixed on a single place, the large double doors at the end of the corridor through which Lily had been taken. Time passed like torture. 1 hour, then another. Elena no longer knew exactly how much time had gone by, only that she sat there watching the flames dance in the fireplace, listening to the steady ticking of an antique clock like a heartbeat. Occasionally, someone passed through the hallway outside, hurried footsteps, whispered voices, a door opening and closing, and Elena did not dare step out to see what was happening. She did not belong here. She was only an outsider swept into a storm that was not hers. As she waited, she took in the room around her. Every object radiated a kind of wealth so excessive it felt unreal. A gold-plated brass lamp, a porcelain vase with delicate hand-painted patterns, a Persian rug beneath her feet woven with intricate designs she imagined must have taken years to complete. On the wall hung a large portrait of a young woman with golden hair and silver-gray eyes, and Elena recognized those eyes instantly, Lily's eyes. The woman in the painting had to be the girl's mother, Dominic Corsetti's late wife. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with a gentle smile and eyes warm as spring, and it was hard to imagine such a woman as the wife of a devil. Yet perhaps Dominic had not always been a devil. Perhaps there had once been a time when he was an ordinary man who knew how to love, how to smile, how to dream, and perhaps the death of this woman had turned him into the thing the entire city feared. Footsteps sounded at the far end of the corridor, pulling Elena from her thoughts, and she looked up to see Dominic pacing back and forth before the double doors like a caged lion. He had removed his coat, revealing a wrinkled white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, his dark hair streaked with silver, disheveled as though he had run his hands through it 100 times that night. His face was still carved from stone, but Elena saw something in his steel-gray eyes, fear, pure and primal, impossible to hide. This was a man who controlled an entire city, yet he could not control this. He could not command his daughter's heart to keep beating steadily. He could not threaten death into staying away. Faced with Lily's illness, all his power and money were meaningless. Marcus Webb stood a few steps away, silent as a shadow, watching his boss with a concern he tried to conceal behind his cold expression. Occasionally exchanging glances with other men stationed along the corridor, no one spoke, no one dared to speak. The entire mansion seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the outcome behind those doors, and Elena, a stranger with $8 in her account, sat in that lavish room watching the most powerful man in the city brought to his knees by the fear of losing his child. The double doors finally opened after nearly 3 hours, and a man stepped out, his hair graying, his face drawn with exhaustion yet his eyes lit with something like relief, dressed in a blue surgical gown with rubber gloves still on his hands, looking as though he had just come from a top-tier hospital operating room rather than a room inside a Mafia mansion. Dominic surged forward before the man could speak, his expression so tightly wound that Elena thought it might crack at any moment. "She is stable," the doctor said, his voice low and steady. "We have stabilized her heart rhythm. She is sleeping now, and will need at least a week of rest." Dominic said nothing, only stood there as his broad shoulders slowly sank, as if a crushing weight had just been lifted from him. Elena saw him close his eyes for a brief second, his lips moving as though forming words without sound. Perhaps thanks, perhaps a prayer, perhaps both. However, the doctor continued, his tone turning more serious. "Dominic, she will need a heart valve replacement surgery within 6 months. We cannot delay any longer. Her heart is weakening day by day. If she does not have the surgery, then tonight will not be the last time." "I know," Dominic said as he opened his eyes, the familiar steel coldness returning to them. "Prepare everything. I do not care what it costs. Find the best surgeon in the world if you have to." The doctor nodded and turned back toward the room. Dominic stood there for another moment, staring at the closing doors, then turned and walked toward Elena. She rose from the sofa on instinct, her heart racing. For the past 3 hours she had nearly forgotten her own existence in this lavish room, but now those steel-gray eyes were fixed on her, and she remembered exactly where she was and who she was facing. Dominic stopped a few steps away, close enough for Elena to feel the force that radiated from him, far enough that she could still breathe. He studied her in silence, his gaze sweeping from her tangled hair down to her torn shoes, assessing every detail as if she were a problem to be solved. "You saved my daughter," he said at last, his voice low and even, no longer flooded with emotion as it had been in the dark alley. "I only did what anyone would do," Elena replied, her voice quieter than she intended. "No," Dominic shook his head, the motion small but decisive. "Not everyone would. Most people would call the police and walk away. Or not call anyone at all. or pretend they saw nothing and go on with their lives. You saw the black rose on her wrist. You knew who she was. You knew calling that number was dangerous, and you still called. Silence stretched between them. Elena did not know what to say. He was right. She had known. She had been afraid, and yet she had done it anyway. Why? Dominic asked, stepping one pace closer. This was a real question. Not praise, not thanks. He wanted to understand. He needed to understand. Elena looked into those steel gray eyes and searched her own soul for the answer. She thought of her years in the system, of nights lying alone in a cold room begging for someone to come and save her, of the feeling of being abandoned, forgotten, treated as though she did not exist. Because I know what it feels like to die alone, Elena said, her voice trembling but honest. I know what it feels like to lie in the dark and no one comes. No one deserves that, especially a child. Dominic did not blink as he looked at her. His face remained carved from stone, but something shifted in his eyes, not softness, not pity, but recognition, respect, as though she had just passed a test she never knew she was taking. What is your name? He asked. Elena. Elena Hartwell. Dominic nodded slowly, committing the name to memory as if it mattered, as if she had just become part of his world whether she wanted to or not. Elena Hartwell, he repeated, his deep voice echoing through the room. I have an offer for you. The word offer echoed through the room like an alarm bell. And Elena knew that in Dominic Corsetti's world an offer was never just an offer. It was an order wrapped in the thin disguise of civility. Dominic did not wait for her reaction. He walked to the armchair opposite the sofa and sat down, his movements weary, yet still radiating an unmistakable authority, then gestured for Elena to sit, and she obeyed as if hypnotized. While you were out there waiting, Dominic began, his voice low and even, as though discussing business rather than the course of her life. I had people look into you. Elena stiffened, the word investigate striking her like a blow. In just a few hours he had dissected her existence, and though she knew she should not be surprised, she still felt violated, stripped bare before a stranger. Elena Hartwell, 27 years old, Dominic continued, his steel gray eyes never leaving her face. Orphaned at 12, 7 foster families, 3 with documented abuse and no prosecutions, aged out of the system at 18 with exactly 1 bag of clothes, currently working 3 jobs, dishwashing, waitressing, and cleaning, medical debt of $73,000 from the stabbing 2 years ago, an additional $15,000 loan from a former boyfriend who defrauded you, 2 months behind on rent and facing eviction, bank account balance of $8.63 as of this morning. Elena felt as though she had been punched in the stomach, each fact he spoke slicing into what little dignity she had left, and she wanted to stand up and leave, to scream that her life was none of his business, but she could not. She sat there silent and humiliated. Dominic was not finished. You also discovered a lump in your breast 3 weeks ago but have no money for an exam, no health insurance. You have not eaten a proper meal in 5 days, and the shoes you are wearing have torn soles padded with cardboard so your feet do not touch the ground. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, but she forced them back. She would not cry in front of him. She had cried enough in her life. Why are you telling me all this? She asked, her voice trembling, though she fought to keep it steady. So you can see how pathetic I am. No, Dominic replied, his tone softening just a fraction. So you understand that I know who you are. I know you have nothing, and I know that despite having nothing, you took off your jacket to cover my daughter. You stayed with her in the cold, and you called a number you knew could get you killed. He leaned forward, those steel gray eyes boring into her. You are the only person in 9 years my daughter has ever called an angel. She trusts no one. She is afraid of everyone, but she trusted you, and that is something I cannot buy with money. Elena did not know where he was leading her, only that her heart was racing and her hands were shaking. My daughter needs a guardian, Dominic said, each word clear and final. Not a nanny, not a bodyguard, but someone she can trust, someone who will be with her at all times, someone who will place her safety above everything, even their own life. I want you to do that. I am not a bodyguard, Elena said weakly. I know nothing about protection or security. I am just a waitress. You are the person who stayed with my daughter when she needed someone most, Dominic cut in. And that is something no training can teach and no amount of money can buy. He stood and moved to the window overlooking the garden drowned in darkness. $10,000 a month, a room in this estate, a private bedroom next to Lily's. All living expenses covered, top-tier health insurance, including an examination of the lump in your breast tomorrow. Elena stopped breathing. $10,000 a month was more than 10 times what she earned from 3 jobs combined. a number she had never dared imagine even in her most reckless dreams. Your medical debt. Dominic turned back to her. I will erase it. $73,000 gone. The loan your former boyfriend left you, also erased. $15,000 no longer exists. You will never return to that miserable apartment. You will never worry about rent, food, or torn shoes again. You will have everything you need. Everything. Elena stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. This was an offer she could not refuse. Not because of threat, but because it was too perfect, too timely, too much like a miracle from a fairy tale she had long since stopped believing in. Why? She whispered. Why me? Because my daughter chose you, Dominic answered, his voice heavy as stone. And in my world, that is the only reason that matters. Dominic left after making the offer, leaving Elena alone in the opulent sitting room with millions of thoughts spiraling through her mind. He did not demand an immediate answer. He said she had until morning to think, then walked away as if he already knew what her answer would be. And perhaps he was right. Perhaps they both knew she had no other choice. Yet Elena still needed time. She needed to understand what she was doing, what she was stepping into, what she would be giving up. The fire in the hearth had burned low, leaving only glowing embers pulsing softly in the darkness. And Elena sat curled on the sofa, the wool blanket wrapped around her, but unable to chase away the cold that came from within. The cold of fear, the cold of uncertainty, the cold of someone standing at a crossroads of fate without knowing where either path would lead. She thought about Dominic's offer. $10,000 a month, debts erased, a warm place to live, health insurance, everything she had ever dreamed of, ever prayed for, ever believed she would never have, now laid before her like a gift fallen from the sky. Yet Elena was not naive. She knew there was no free meal, no miracle without a price. And what was the price of this offer? Living in the home of a mafia boss, becoming part of a world where violence was language and blood was currency, closing her eyes to things she did not want to know. The screams from basements, the people who went in and never came out. She would no longer be Elena Hartwell, the poor but untainted waitress. She would become part of the machine, even if only a tiny cog, eating food bought with dirty money, wearing clothes bought with dirty money, sleeping in a room built with dirty money. Could she accept that? Could she look at herself in the mirror every morning without disgust? Then she thought of the other choice, going back to her crumbling apartment if she was even allowed to return, being thrown onto the street within days, sleeping on sidewalks in the October cold, working 3 jobs and still barely surviving, waiting for the lump in her breast to grow while she had no money for treatment, dying alone in some forgotten corner with no one knowing, no one caring, no one remembering. That was her future if she refused, the reality she had lived for 9 years. And she was so tired, so exhausted, so desperately worn down from fighting alone. Elena closed her eyes and Lily's silver eyes rose in her mind. The child had called her an angel, had looked at her with absolute trust as if she were the only person in the world who could save her. No one had ever looked at Elena that way. No one had ever needed her like that. In 27 years of life, she had never been important to anyone. Only invisible, passed between foster homes, forgotten by society, used by men like Jason. But to Lily, she was an angel. To a 7-year-old girl with silver eyes and a fragile heart, Elena Hartwell was the most important person in the world. And that thought was both terrifying and warm. It made her want to cry and smile at the same time. It made her realize that perhaps, just perhaps, this was not only about money or safety. Perhaps it was about finding a reason to live, a reason to wake up each morning, a person who truly needed her, for the first time in her life. A knock as light as a butterfly's wings made Elena flinch. She lifted her head, heart racing, unsure of what awaited her beyond the door. Perhaps a servant coming to check on her, perhaps Marcus Webb arriving to escort her away, perhaps Dominic himself demanding an answer sooner than promised. But when she opened the door, she saw the last thing she expected. Lily stood there, small in white pajamas, clutching a worn stuffed bear to her chest, silver eyes shimmering under the hallway lights, weary and anxious all at once, and behind her a servant hovered a few steps back, face tense as if awaiting punishment for letting the little mistress wander in the night. Lily, Elena dropped to her knees to meet the child's gaze, worry softening her voice. You should not be out of bed. You just had surgery. You need to rest. I cannot sleep, Lily whispered, her voice light as air. I am scared. What are you scared of? Elena asked gently. I am scared that when I wake up, you will not be here anymore. The words pierced Elena's heart like a blade, And as she looked into the child's silver eyes, she saw a fear she knew too well. The fear of abandonment. The fear of waking to discover the one you trusted has vanished. The fear Elena had lived with for 27 years. She rested a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder, feeling the small body trembling beneath the thin fabric. "Come in," Elena said, guiding her into the sitting room. "Sit with me." Lily climbed onto the sofa and pressed close to Elena as if afraid she might disappear if she let go, the stuffed bear placed between them like a guardian. Elena pulled the wool blanket around them both, the warmth of the child's body easing some of the cold that had seeped into her bones. "Will you stay?" Lily asked, silver eyes lifting to Elena with all the fragility of a 7-year-old child. "Papa said you could stay. Papa said you would be the angel who keeps me safe. But do you want to?" Elena did not answer at once. She looked down at the child, at the golden hair now neatly brushed, at the skin still pale after the ordeal, at the small hands gripping hers as if it were the only lifeline in a vast sea. "Do you know who I am?" Elena asked. "You are my angel," Lily replied without hesitation. "You are the one who found me in the dark. You stayed with me when I was scared. Mama said angels come when you need them, and you came. But I am not really an angel," Elena said, her voice thick. "I am just an ordinary person. I have many problems. I do not know what I can do." Lily shook her head, stubborn in the way only a 7-year-old can be when she believes in something. "Angels do not have to be perfect," Lily said, repeating words she must have once heard from her mother. "Angels just have to be there when someone needs them. And you were there. You did not leave me. You will not leave me, will you?" That final question shattered every wall Elena had built around her heart, and as she looked into the silver eyes filled with hope and fear intertwined, she saw herself 20 years earlier, a 12-year-old girl watching the hearse carry her parents' coffins away, wondering who would stay with her now. That child had had no one. But Lily was different. Lily could have her, if she was brave enough to stay, strong enough to accept, loving enough to give even though she herself had been hurt too many times. "I will stay," Elena heard herself say, and she knew it was true, not because of money, not because of fear, but because this child needed her, because for the first time in her life she had the chance to be important to someone, because sometimes saving another person is also a way of saving yourself. Lily threw her arms around Elena, her small body trembling against her, and Elena held her close, feeling hot tears run down her cheeks. But these were not tears of pain. They were the tears of someone who had finally found a purpose after 27 years of being lost. And from the shadows at the far end of the corridor, Dominic stood in silence, watching it all, and for the first time in many years, something other than cold appeared in his steel-gray eyes. Elena woke in silence. Not the frightening silence of her old apartment where gunshots could erupt at any moment, but the silence of peace, of safety, of an entirely different world, lying on the largest bed she had ever touched, sheets soft as silk, blankets warm as the embrace of a mother whose face she could no longer remember. Morning sunlight slipping through red velvet curtains and painting golden streaks across the polished oak floor. And it took several seconds for her to remember where she was, several more to believe that the night before had not been a dream, that she had agreed to stay, that she had held Lily and promised not to leave, that she had crossed a threshold from which there was no turning back. Then Elena sat up, her body still tired but her mind strangely alert, and looked around the room the servants had led her to, after Lily had fallen asleep in her arms. A room larger than her old apartment, with high ceilings, wide windows overlooking the garden, and antique furnishings she guessed were worth many years of her wages. A mahogany vanity, a gold-framed mirror, a small crystal chandelier hanging above the bed, everything unfamiliar and yet somehow welcoming. And when she opened the wardrobe she froze, because it was not empty as she had expected. New clothes hung neatly on cedar, scented wooden hangers, dresses, sweaters, trousers, all elegant without being ostentatious, refined without feeling distant, and she reached out to touch a cream-colored cashmere sweater, feeling fabric soft as clouds beneath her fingers, something she had never owned in her life, realizing someone had prepared everything overnight. Someone had known her measurements, her style, even the colors that suited her pale skin, a level of care so precise it was almost unsettling, reminding her that in Dominic Corsetti's world nothing was impossible. Then a gentle knock sounded, and a polite servant's voice spoke from the other side of the door that breakfast was ready, and Mr. Corsetti and Miss Lily were waiting in the garden. Elena dressed quickly, choosing the cashmere sweater and dark blue jeans, everything fitting perfectly as if tailored for her. New shoes placed beneath the wardrobe, soft leather and cushioned soles replacing the torn pair she had worn for 2 years, and when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back, No longer the exhausted waitress with dark circles and ashen skin. Still tired and still anxious, but with something different, perhaps hope, or perhaps just the illusion of fine clothes. And the garden in the morning took her breath away. Warm sunlight spilling over perfectly trimmed flower beds, the fountains sparkling like diamonds, the air fragrant with roses and fresh grass. Elena walking along the stone path while deliberately avoiding the silent guards stationed around the garden like statues. Lily seated at a white wrought iron table in the center, wearing a yellow dress bright as sunshine, carefully arranging berries on her plate by color, her face lighting up like sunrise when she saw Elena, calling out Angel and waving excitedly that she had been waiting. A smile blooming on Elena's lips despite herself as she approached the table, and only then did she truly notice the man seated opposite Lily, Dominic Corsetti in daylight, looking different from what she had imagined. Still dangerous and commanding, but somehow more human. The black suit replaced by a white shirt and dark trousers revealing strong wrists and a faint scar along his forearm. Dark hair streaked with silver neatly combed. Sharp face clean-shaven. Greeting her good morning in a low, polite voice so unlike the commands of the night before, saying he trusted she had slept well. Elena taking the chair beside Lily and feeling his steel-gray eyes follow her every movement, as she thanked him and said everything was wonderful. Lily announcing happily that Papa said Elena would stay with her now, that they would eat breakfast together every day, that Elena would read to her and be her own angel. Elena looking at the child and then at Dominic, who was watching her with an unreadable expression, as if weighing whether she deserved his daughter's trust, and she said she would try, that she would do her best, not knowing whether she was speaking to Lily or to Dominic, only knowing that for the first time in her life she meant it with everything she had. After breakfast, Dominic rose and motioned for Elena to follow him. Lily was led away to rest by a servant on the doctor's orders, the little girl waving at Elena with a radiant smile before disappearing behind a door. Elena followed Dominic back into the mansion, feeling as though she were entering a maze without knowing where the exit lay, while Marcus Webb appeared from nowhere and trailed them in silence like a loyal shadow. "Your room is next to Lily's, connected by a door," Dominic began to explain, his voice low and precise, as if instructing a new recruit. "That door only opens from Lily's side, so she can come to you at any time without knocking." They passed through long corridors lined with priceless paintings and glittering chandeliers, until Dominic stopped before a section of wall that looked exactly like the rest, with no handle and no sign it concealed anything. He placed his hand on a specific point, and the wall slid open soundlessly, revealing a room beyond. Elena stepped inside and stopped breathing. This was not an ordinary room. It was a bunker, with reinforced concrete walls dozens of centimeters thick, a steel door capable of stopping armor-piercing rounds, a folding bed, cabinets stocked with food and water for 2 weeks, an independent ventilation system, an emergency communication line connected directly to Marcus and the security team, and in one corner a small weapons locker holding pistols, knives, and things Elena did not want to examine too closely. "The safe room?" Dominic said, watching her reaction. "If anything happens during the night, anything at all, you bring Lily here and press this red button." He pointed to a large button mounted on the wall. No thinking. No hesitation. No going back for any reason. You run, and you protect her. Do you understand? Elena nodded, her throat dry. "What does anything mean?" she asked, her voice shaking more than she wanted. Dominic looked at her for a long moment, his steel-gray eyes giving nothing away. "There are people who want my daughter dead," he said, each word cold as ice. "Enemies within the organization, enemies outside it. People who think that if they kill Lily, they can control me. They believe she is my weakness. And they are right." Elena felt as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown over her. She had known Dominic was dangerous, had known his world was violent, but hearing that someone wanted to kill a 7-year-old child was something else entirely. It made her nauseous. It terrified her. And it made her angry. "Lily is just a child," Elena said, her voice firmer than she expected. "She has done nothing wrong. In my world, innocence does not mean safety," Dominic replied, his voice no longer cold but weary. "I have tried to protect her, built high walls, hired the best guards, kept her educated at home so no one could reach her, but I cannot keep her in a glass cage forever. She needs to live. She needs to breathe. She needs to feel the world. And every time she steps beyond these walls, I die a little from fear." They left the safe room and continued down the corridors, Dominic pointing out security cameras, emergency exits, rooms she was forbidden to enter under any circumstances, introducing the primary guards she would work with, cold-faced men who nodded at her with undisguised caution. "You will learn to use a gun," Dominic said as they passed the training room in the basement. Marcus will teach you. You will also learn basic self-defense and how to identify threats. I do not need you to become a warrior. I need you skilled enough to keep Lily safe until my men arrive. I have never held a gun in my life, Elena said. You will learn, Dominic replied, not as a suggestion but as an undeniable fact. For Lily, you will learn everything necessary. He stopped and turned to her, steel gray eyes piercing straight through her. I made this clear last night. You are not just a nanny. You are the final line of defense between my daughter and the darkness that wants to devour her. Do you understand how heavy that responsibility is? Elena met the gaze of the most feared man in the city and saw no threat there, only fear. The fear of a father who had already lost his wife and could not survive losing his daughter as well. I understand, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. I will not let anyone touch Lily. Dominic studied her for another moment, then nodded. It was the first time Elena saw something like approval appear in his steel gray eyes. That afternoon, Elena was allowed to glimpse another side of Lily's life for the first time. The art studio occupied an entire wing on the west side of the mansion, a vast space crowned by a glass ceiling that poured natural light inside like a cascade of molten gold, paintings lining the walls, easels arranged in neat rows, and the scent of oil paint mixed with pine wood creating a strange, unfamiliar fragrance Elena had never known. Lily tugged her inside with the excitement of a child revealing a secret treasure. This is where I paint, she said, silver eyes sparkling. This is my favorite place in the whole house. A woman in her 50s rose from a chair near the window as they entered, her silver hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, her hands smeared with paint in every color, and her warm brown eyes carrying the quiet wisdom of someone who had lived through many storms. Her smile was gentle, yet beneath it lay unspoken histories Elena could sense without being able to name. This is Miss Catherine, Lily said, pulling Elena closer to the woman. She teaches me to paint. She also taught Mama before I was born. Catherine inclined her head toward Elena with calm respect. Mr. Corsetti told me about you, she said softly. Lily has not stopped talking about her angel all morning. I am very glad to meet the person who brought her smile back. Elena did not know how to respond, so she simply nodded and took the seat Catherine indicated, watching the lesson begin. Lily standing before the easel in a white apron wrapped around her small frame, brush held like a magic wand. And then the miracle unfolded. The careful, restrained child Elena had seen at breakfast vanished completely. Lily with a brush in her hand was something else entirely, wild and free, every stroke bold and assured as if she had been painting for 1,000 years, colors dancing across the canvas and forming shapes that made Elena step closer, her heart tightening as she recognized them. Angels. Not the angels of religious paintings with pristine white wings and glowing halos, but angels with wings black as ink, as moonless night, as the darkness Elena herself had once feared, and yet they were not frightening. They were beautiful, achingly so. Beautiful in a sorrowful way, in a fierce way that made one want to cry without knowing why. What kind of angels are these? Elena whispered, afraid to break the spell. Lily kept painting, silver eyes fixed on the canvas. These are guardian angels, she replied calmly, as if stating the most obvious truth in the world. Mama told me about them. She said everyone has an angel watching over them and protecting them. But sometimes, to protect the ones they love, angels have to do bad things. They have to fight the monsters. They have to go into the scary places where there is no light. Lily paused, studying the painting with a serious look on her small face. And because they fight the bad things, soot and dust cover their wings until they turn black. But Mama said they are still angels inside. They still protect us. They just look a little different. Elena looked at the painting and thought of Dominic, of hands that had taken lives yet trembled when they touched his daughter's face, of steel gray eyes cold to the world yet filled with tears at the thought of losing Lily, of a man who ruled the underworld with brutality but knelt to read his child a bedtime story each night. Black-winged angel. Perhaps that was the truest name for him. Not a devil as the city called him, not a saint as he never claimed to be, just an angel who had walked too long in the dark, who had done too many unforgivable things, yet still fought to protect the last light left in his life. Papa is a black-winged angel too, Lily said, as if reading Elena's thoughts. I know Papa does bad things. I hear the grown-ups talking, but Papa does them for me. Papa does them to keep me safe. So it is okay if Papa's wings are black. I still love Papa. Catherine looked at Elena with quiet understanding. She is wiser than people realize, she said softly. She understands her father's world in a way no one taught her. That is both a blessing and a curse. Elena turned back to the painting, to the black-winged angels spreading their wings around a small child at the center. And she understood that this was more than art. This was how Lily saw the world. This was how she survived her father's world, while somehow preserving the fragile, miraculous innocence in her silver eyes. The weeks that followed passed like a dream. Elena hardly dared to believe was real. She learned how to wake each morning in the luxurious room without jolting in confusion about where she was, learned how to wear expensive clothes without feeling as though she were dressed in someone else's life, learned how to eat rich, abundant meals without choking on memories of hunger. But more than anything, she learned how to love Lily, because every day with the child revealed something new. Lily loved reading books about space and the universe despite being only 7 years old. Lily was afraid of thunder, yet loved the sound of rain falling on the glass roof of the art studio. Lily could sit for hours painting but could not focus for more than 10 minutes on mathematics. Lily called Elena her angel every single day, and each time she heard that word, Elena felt her heart melt a little more. She also learned how to use a gun as Dominic required, with Marcus Webb training her every early morning before Lily woke. The first time she held a pistol, her hands shook so badly she could barely keep it steady. Yet Marcus was unexpectedly patient, guiding her step by step until she could hit the target 5 times out of 10. Not impressive, but enough to defend herself, enough to protect Lily if necessary. Life inside the Corsetti mansion looked like paradise on the surface, but Elena was not naive enough to believe that paradise could exist without darkness lurking somewhere nearby. And that darkness, she slowly realized, was growing heavier with each passing day. The number of guards on patrol increased starting 2 weeks earlier. Elena counted at least 10 new faces she had never seen before. Cameras were installed in corners that had previously been bare. Dominic was home less often, late-night meetings stretching into dawn, and every time he returned his face looked more strained than before. Marcus Webb began appearing with bruises and cuts on his face that no one explained. Servants moved more quietly through the house, spoke in softer whispers, as if afraid of disturbing something fragile hanging over all of them. Elena knew she should not ask questions. She knew that in this world knowing too much could get a person killed, but when Lily's safety was at stake, she could not look away. That night Elena woke to voices drifting in from the hallway. She did not mean to eavesdrop, but Dominic's and Marcus's voices were too clear in the deep stillness of the night. She lay motionless, holding her breath, listening. "Tony Beretti is moving," Marcus said, his voice stretched tight like a wire about to snap. "He has contacted 3 families in the south. He is gathering forces. Our sources say he is waiting for the right moment to strike. Let him wait," Dominic replied, his voice cold as ice, though Elena could hear lethal danger in every word. "When he moves, I will show him what it means to wait 7 years for revenge. He thinks you have grown weak," Marcus continued. "He thinks you are too focused on Lily and have lost your edge. He is telling the other families that the Corsetti Empire is about to fall." "I know exactly what he thinks," Dominic said, "and that is precisely what I want him to think." Silence followed, thick and suffocating. Then Marcus spoke again, lower now but still audible to Elena. "What about the child? If Beretti decides to go after Lily instead of you?" The silence that followed was unbearable, and when Dominic finally spoke, his voice was no longer cold. It was murderous, a promise of hell to anyone who dared touch his daughter. "If he touches Lily, I will kill him. I will kill his family. I will kill everyone who stands beside him, and I will do it slowly, so he feels every second of pain before he dies. Beretti wants war. I will give him war." Footsteps faded down the corridor, and Elena lay there in the darkness with her heart pounding wildly, remembering Dominic's warning on the first day, that someone wanted Lily dead. Now she had a name. Tony Beretti, and she knew the storm was coming. Many nights after the conversation Elena had overheard by accident, she could not sleep. The image of Tony Beretti, a man she had never met yet who had become a haunting shadow, lingered relentlessly in her mind. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Lily's steady breathing through the connecting door between their rooms, and wondering whether she was strong enough to protect the child if the worst were to happen. Eventually she gave up on sleep and decided to go downstairs for a glass of water. The mansion at night was utterly different from the daytime, so silent that each of her footsteps echoed like a drumbeat, moonlight slipping through the tall windows and painting silver streaks across the marble floors, creating a scene both beautiful and eerie. As Elena passed Dominic's study, she noticed a thin glow of light leaking through the slightly open door. She meant to walk past, not wanting to intrude, but a deep voice from inside stopped her. "Come in," Dominic's voice said, as if he had known she was there before she herself had realized it. "I heard your footsteps from the end of the hall." Elena hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and stepped inside. The study lay in shadow, lit only by a small desk lamp casting light over one corner. Dominic sat in a large leather chair by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the bottle beside him already half empty. He was not wearing his usual suit, only a white shirt with the top buttons undone, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. In the dim light, he looked more exhausted than she had ever seen him, like a man who had carried the weight of the world on his shoulders for far too long. "Cannot sleep?" he asked, not looking at her but out the window where moonlight spilled into the garden. "I cannot sleep," Elena admitted, standing by the door, unsure whether she should enter or leave. Dominic gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Sit. I cannot sleep either. I have not slept through a full night in 7 years. 7 years, she repeated softly. Since your wife died." Dominic took a sip of whiskey, steel gray eyes distant. "Alessandra," he said the name as though it were a prayer and a curse at the same time. "She died giving birth to Lily. The doctors said her heart could not take it. I hired the best doctors, the best hospital, everything money could buy. But money cannot buy life. I stood there and watched her slip away, and there was nothing I could do." He paused, gripping the glass so tightly Elena feared it might shatter. "That was the only time in my life I felt completely powerless. I can kill anyone. I can destroy anything. But I could not save the woman I loved. I saw her portrait in the sitting room," Elena said gently. "She was beautiful. She was light," Dominic replied, his voice dropping. "She was the only person who ever saw the man I truly am behind all of this. She was not afraid of me. She did not need my money. She loved me for who I was, not for being Dominic Corsetti, and when she died, she took the best part of me with her." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking of a clock and the wind outside the window. Elena looked at the man before her, the man the entire city called a devil, and saw what so few ever did. Loneliness, vast and endless. The loneliness of someone who had lost half his soul and did not know how to live with what remained. "Lily has her eyes," Dominic said, his voice suddenly softer. "Every time I look at her, I feel happiness and pain at the same time. She is everything Alessandra left behind. The only reason I still wake up every morning, the only thing keeping me from becoming a complete monster." "You are not a monster," Elena said, surprised by the honesty in her own voice. "Monsters do not love their children the way you love Lily." Dominic looked at her for the first time since she had entered the room, and in the lamplight his steel gray eyes seemed warmer, more human. "Do you know why I am telling you these things?" he asked. Elena shook her head. "Because you are the first person since Alessandra whom Lily trusts completely," Dominic replied. "Because you stayed when you could have walked away. Because every night when I pass Lily's room and see you sitting by her bed reading to her, I remember how Alessandra used to do the same." He paused, as if weighing whether to continue. "I do not know if I trust you because you deserve it, or because I am too lonely to keep going on my own. But whatever the reason, you have become part of this family, and in my world, family is the only thing that is sacred." Elena felt tears rise but forced them back. She looked at the lonely man with a glass of whiskey in his hand, the man who carried a criminal empire on his shoulders yet could not bear the loss of his wife, and she understood that something had shifted between them that night. Not love, not yet, but understanding, a fragile bond between two solitary souls who had found each other in the dark. "Thank you for telling me," Elena said as she stood. "I will not betray your trust. I promise." Dominic nodded and turned back toward the window. "Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow will be a long day. Every night will be long until I finish what must be done." Elena stepped out of the room, but before closing the door she looked back once more. Dominic still sat there alone in the darkness, whiskey in hand, his solitary figure like a forgotten stone statue, and she wondered whether anyone could ever heal the wound in that man's heart, or whether it would remain a scar that would never truly fade. 3 nights after the conversation in the study, the nightmare the entire mansion feared finally arrived. Elena was asleep when a faint cry drifted through the connecting door between the 2 rooms, and she sprang up like a coiled spring, racing into Lily's room, her heart stopping when she saw the child. Lily lay curled on the bed, sweat soaking her blonde hair, her small body trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. Her skin so pale it was almost translucent, lips tinged blue, her breathing labored as if every breath were a desperate fight for survival. Elena touched Lily's forehead and nearly pulled her hand back from the heat, a fever so high it was terrifying. "Angel," Lily whispered, silver eyes opening but dull and unfocused. "It hurts. My chest hurts." Elena's heart shattered. She pressed the emergency call button above the bed, then gently lifted Lily's head onto her lap. "I am here," she whispered, her voice shaking as she forced herself to stay calm. "I am not going anywhere. Dr. Vaughn arrived within 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes stretched like an eternity. Elena wiped the sweat from Lily's forehead, told fairy tales in a trembling voice, sang lullabies she still remembered from the faintest memories of her mother, doing everything she could to keep the child awake, to keep those silver eyes from closing. Dr. Vaughn examined Lily, his expression growing increasingly grave. "Her heart is under strain," he said tightly. "The fever is putting pressure on a heart that is already weak. We need to bring the fever down immediately and monitor her heart rate all night. If there is no improvement, we may need emergency surgery." Dominic appeared in the doorway at some point without Elena noticing. He stood there still, dressed in his daytime clothes as if he had never slept. His face carved from stone, but his steel-gray eyes filled with pain. He looked at his daughter lying there, small and fragile, and Elena saw his hands clench until his knuckles turned white. "Will she be all right?" Dominic asked, his voice hoarse. "I am doing everything I can," Dr. Vaughn replied, offering no promises. "Tonight is critical." Dominic stepped into the room and approached his daughter's bedside, then stopped as if he did not know what to do. In his world, every problem could be solved with money, with power, with violence, but here beside his child's bed all of it was useless. He was just a father watching his child suffer, utterly helpless. Elena saw it in his eyes, the helplessness, the desperation, the pure fear of a man about to lose the most important thing in his life, and she made a decision. "Let me stay with her tonight," Elena said to Dominic, her voice gentle but firm. "You have not slept in days. You need rest for what is coming." "I cannot leave her," Dominic replied, his voice breaking. "You are not leaving her," Elena said. "You are right next door. If anything happens, I will call you immediately. But for now, let me take care of her. This is my job. This is why I am here." Dominic looked at her for a long moment, then at Lily, then back at Elena, and finally he nodded. A small, reluctant movement, yet he did not leave. He retreated to the corner of the room, sat down in a chair in the shadows, and stayed there all night. Elena said nothing. She understood that some fears cannot be faced alone. Some nights cannot be survived without someone else present, even if that person does nothing more than sit silently in the dark. That night stretched on endlessly. Elena changed the cold cloth on Lily's forehead countless times. She read to her until her voice grew hoarse. She sang lullabies until she no longer remembered the words. She held the child's small hand and did not let go, as if afraid that if she released it, Lily would drift away. Dr. Vaughn came to check on her every hour, his tense expression gradually easing as the temperature slowly came down, and in the corner of the room Dominic sat unmoving, steel-gray eyes never leaving his daughter for a single second, like a stone sentinel guarding his most precious treasure. When dawn finally began to filter through the curtains, the fever at last broke. Lily fell into a peaceful sleep, her breathing steady, color returning to her cheeks, and Elena sat there exhausted but relieved, silent tears slipping down her face, tears she did not bother to wipe away. Lily opened her eyes late the next morning, and it was the most beautiful moment Elena had ever witnessed. The silver eyes no longer dull as they had been the night before, but clear as a lake after a storm, looking up at Elena with an absolute trust she did not know she deserved. "The angel stayed here all night," Lily whispered, her voice still weak but her lips forming a smile. "I knew it. I could feel it. I dreamed I was falling into darkness, but someone was holding my hand and would not let go. That was you, wasn't it?" Elena could not find any words. She only nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks without any attempt to hide them. Then she bent down and held Lily close, feeling the small body warmer than the night before, the heartbeat steadier than the night before, and she knew she loved this child in a way she had never loved anyone in her life. Not the love of a guardian for the one she protected, but the love of a mother for a child fate had placed in her arms. "You stayed with me all night?" Lily asked when Elena loosened her embrace. "You did not sleep. Aren't you tired?" "There are nights when sleep does not matter," Elena answered, gently smoothing the girl's golden hair. "There are people who matter more than sleep, and you are the most important person in my life." Lily's silver eyes brightened, and then she said something that shattered Elena's heart completely. "Mama in heaven sent you to me, didn't she?" the girl asked with quiet certainty. "Mama knew Papa needed someone to help take care of me. Mama knew I needed an angel, so Mama sent you. I will never let you go anywhere. You are my angel, forever." Elena was about to reply when she felt a gaze upon her from the doorway. She turned and saw Dominic standing there, not knowing how long he had been watching. He was still wearing the clothes from the night before, eyes red from lack of sleep, unshaven, his face rougher than usual, yet the steel-gray eyes were no longer cold as they always were. They were fixed on Elena with something she could not name. Not simple gratitude. Not the respect of an employer for someone in his service. This was something deeper, warmer, and more frightening. It was the look of a man who had just realized that the woman before him mattered far more than he had ever expected. "Papa," Lily called softly, waving a weak hand. "Papa, don't stand there. Come here with me and my angel." Dominic stepped into the room, each step heavy with exhaustion, yet lightened by the sight of his daughter awake. He sat on the other side of Lily's bed, facing Elena, and for the first time the space between them was no longer that of an employer and an employee. It was the space between two people who loved the same child, who had stayed awake through the same night of fear, who had both wept in silence at the thought of losing her. "How do you feel?" Dominic asked Lily, his voice hoarse. "I feel better, Papa," Lily smiled faintly. "The angel healed me. She stayed with me all night and did not let me fall into the darkness. Papa has to thank the angel very much." Dominic looked at Elena, and she saw the steel-gray eyes tremble for a brief moment. "I know," he said, his voice low and more sincere than anything she had ever heard from him. "I know I owe her more than I can ever repay. Papa owes her very much too." Silence settled between them, but it was not a heavy silence. It was the silence of things that did not need to be spoken, of feelings too vast for words. Lily took Elena's hand with one hand and Dominic's with the other, pulling them both closer as if trying to bind them together. "I have an angel and a devil protecting me," Lily murmured sleepily as exhaustion returned. "No one can hurt me. Don't ever leave me. Both of you. I promise," Dominic said. "I promise," Elena said. And when Lily's silver eyes finally closed in peaceful sleep, Dominic looked at Elena over the angelic face of his daughter. This time he did not look away. This time he allowed her to see something in his steel-gray eyes that he had kept hidden for 7 long years. And Elena, the woman who had believed she would never be loved, felt her heart begin to race for an entirely new reason. 3 months had passed since that fateful night. 3 months since Elena Hartwell, the waitress with $8 in her bank account, stepped into the life of a Mafia boss and his small daughter. 3 months of waking each morning in a luxurious room, of afternoons spent reading with Lily in the garden, of evenings learning to shoot with Marcus, and of late nights talking with Dominic over a glass of whiskey. 3 months in which Elena no longer recognized the woman she used to be. And that afternoon she stood on the balcony of her room, looking down at the garden where Lily was painting under Catherine's watchful eye. The child far healthier now, after the fever, color returned to her cheeks, laughter echoing through the estate each day, though the heart valve surgery still loomed ahead like a fragile reminder that this happiness was as delicate as morning dew. Elena's debts were gone. The lump in her breast after examination by the finest doctors money could buy had proven benign and had been removed. She had food, shelter, clothes, and a purpose, but more important than all of that, she had Lily. And she had Dominic, though she did not know what to call what existed between them. Familiar footsteps sounded behind her, and she did not need to turn to know who it was. She had learned the sound of his walk, heavy yet steady like the drum beat announcing a king's arrival. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic asked as he stood beside her, looking down at the garden where Lily was coloring her latest painting. Elena was silent for a moment, searching for the right answer to such a simple yet complicated question. 3 months ago I thought my life was over," she said softly. "I thought I would die alone in that miserable apartment, and no one would ever know or care." She turned to look at Dominic, and for the first time felt no fear meeting his steel-gray eyes. "And now, I am here. I have a reason to wake up every morning. Someone who needs me. A place to call home. I do not know what I did to deserve all of this." "You did nothing to deserve it," Dominic replied, his voice deeper and warmer than she had ever heard. "You were simply yourself. You were the woman who could not walk past a child in a dark alley even knowing the danger, who took off her jacket for her even while freezing, who stayed up all night caring for Lily when no one demanded it of you. That is not doing something to earn it. That is who you are, and that nature is more valuable than anything money can buy." Silence stretched between them, but it was no longer distant. It was the silence of two people who understood each other, who had seen the darkest corners of each other's souls and still chose to stay. "I do not know what the future holds," Dominic said, looking into the distance. "There are people who want me dead. Wars I must fight. Lily's surgery to face. But whatever happens, you and Lily will be protected. I promise." He turned to Elena, and the steel in his eyes softened in the glow of the setting sun. "And I want you to know that you brought back something I thought I had lost forever. Hope, the belief that maybe, just maybe, I do not have to face the darkness alone anymore." Elena felt tears rise, but she smiled. That night when I picked up the phone and called you, I thought it was the most reckless decision of my life, she said. Now I know it was the right one. Not because of money, not because of safety, but because it brought me here. To Lily, to you. Dominic said nothing more. He simply stood beside her. Two silhouettes against the sunset. No promises needed, no declarations required. Only their presence and the understanding that they had found each other in the darkness and would walk forward together no matter how thorny the road ahead might be. Below them, Lily looked up and saw her father and her angel standing side by side on the balcony. She waved with a smile, bright as the sun. And both Elena and Dominic waved back. 3 people, 3 destinies, bound together by a single phone call in the night. Elena Hartwell had found her purpose. After 27 years of being lost, Lily Corsetti had found the angel her mother promised would come. And Dominic Corsetti, the Mafia boss the city called a devil, had found what he believed had been buried with his late wife. Hope, love, and perhaps, just perhaps, the chance for his black wings to heal. Because sometimes angels do not come from heaven with pristine white wings. Sometimes an angel is a poor waitress who cannot afford new shoes. Sometimes an angel is the one who stops when the whole world keeps walking. Sometimes redemption comes from the places we least expect. And today's story brings us profound lessons about life, that kindness is never meaningless no matter how poor you are, that sometimes helping others is the very way we save ourselves, that love can bloom even in places ruled by darkness, and that each of us can be an angel in someone's life, if only we dare to open our hearts and refuse to turn away when help is needed. How did this story make you feel? Did it touch your heart? Have you ever experienced a moment in real life where a small decision changed everything for you or for someone else? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below, because we truly want to hear the stories and feelings from the depths of your hearts. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, and share it with those you love. Every subscription, every like, every share is a powerful source of motivation that helps us continue bringing meaningful stories to you every day. We sincerely thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish all of you watching this video abundant health, joy, and peace. And may each day of your lives be filled with calm and happiness. Always remember that sometimes in this life, we are someone's angel, without ever realizing it. Goodbye for now, and we look forward to seeing you again in our next video.